As we learned previously, phishing is the most popular form of cybercrime. Because of this, it is important that we learn how to notice and avoid phishing scams. With that in mind, here are some signs that you may be the intended victim of a phishing scam.
The first thing you want to look at is where the email originated from. If the domain of the email is public, such as Google, Hotmail, Yahoo, etc., it should give you cause for concern. This is especially true if the email claims to be from your bank or a website that you frequently visit.
Next, is the email domain spelled correctly? Cybercriminals will often register domain names that are very close to legitimate ones in order to confuse their intended victims. If you are not sure, look for a previous legitimate email to see if the domain names are identical. If they are not identical, delete the email immediately.
Another potential indicator of a phishing scam is a poorly written email. Because many phishing scams originate from other countries, they often do not have a good grasp of the English language, thus the email will utilize awkward phrasings and structure. Most emails that originate from a legitimate source, for example your bank, will be well written and very professional in their appearance. It would be very rare to receive a legitimate email from a trusted source that is not well written.
Emails that contain suspicious links are also often indicators of a phishing scam. Often the email may appear to be from a person you know, and the message may only say "check this out," and then have a link. Whenever you receive this type of email, your best course of action is to either call or write back to the person it appears to be from and ask if they sent you a link. With that being said, if you do write back, you should not reply to the original email. Instead, write a new email to them with the email address you have in your contacts. If they confirm the email is from them, then you can feel more confident in clicking on the link.
Lastly, any email that creates a sense of urgency may also be an indicator of a phishing scam. By creating a sense of urgency, the attacker can get you to comply without taking the time to properly think about what you are being asked to do. Quite often, these types of emails will imply that you will lose access to an account if you fail to take action immediately. In these situations, your best course of action is to slow down and take the time to analyze the email. This will allow you to see if any of the other phishing indicators may be present. Taking a few extra minutes to do this can save you a lot of time in the long run.
Now that you've learned what a potential phishing scam might look like, let's examine a few emails and determine if these are legitimate, or if they are more likely to be a phishing scam.
In our first example, you recently received an email, with a link to a picture, from your friend Greg who lives in Minnesota. Take a moment to examine this email, using the tips you learned earlier, and determine whether or not you think this is a legitimate email from your friend Greg, or a phishing scam.
Now that you've examined the email, is this from your friend Greg? Or is it more likely to be a phishing scam?
If you guessed this was a phishing scam, you would be correct. We are able to determine this based on a few clues. First, look at the email address. This email originated from Europe. We can tell that by the .eu in the email address. Because Greg is from Minnesota, he is unlikely to have a European email address. Secondly, the link looks very suspicious. It points to a very odd domain name of mexidw.com. Furthermore, the message is very short and generic. These are all indicators of a potential phishing scam. In this case, your best course of action would be to call Greg, and ask if he sent you this email, before clicking on the link.
In our second example, you received an email from a person you do not know. They are asking you to urgently reply to them to discuss a very important matter. Take a moment to examine this email, using the tips you learned earlier, and determine whether or not you think this is a legitimate email or a phishing scam.
Now that you've examined the email, is this more likely to be a legitimate email request?
Or is it more likely to be a phishing scam? If you guessed this was a phishing scam, you would be correct. We are able to decide this based on a few clues. First, look at how poorly written the email is. The grammar is very awkward as well as the use of capitalization for words. Secondly, the email implies a sense of urgency. These are all indicators of a potential phishing scam. In this case, your best course of action would be to not reply and delete the email. In this last example, you received an email from an official-looking organization. Email claims that you have won a substantial amount of money, and you have 2 weeks to claim this money by contacting a person you do not know. Take a moment to examine this email, using the tips you learned earlier, and determine whether or not you think this is a legitimate email or a phishing scam.
Now that you've examined the email, is this more likely to be a legitimate email request?
Or is it more likely to be a phishing scam? If you guessed this was a phishing scam, you would be correct. We are able to decide this based on a few clues. First, look at how poorly written the email is. The grammar is very awkward as well as the use of capitalization for words. Secondly, the email implies a sense of urgency. Lastly, whenever something seems too good to be true, it probably is. Have you ever heard of another person that was randomly awarded $1 million? These are all indicators of a potential phishing scam. In this case, your best course of action would be to not reply or click on any links, and then delete the email.
Now that you've seen actual examples of phishing, it is time to test your knowledge.
At this point, you will need to open a web browser and navigate to sonicwall.com/phishing-IQ-test. Once you are there, click on the Start the Phishing IQ Test button. You will then see the first test question. After carefully reading and examining the email, you will need to decide whether the email is legitimate or phishing by clicking on the appropriate button. After doing so, you will be presented with 6 more emails in which you will do the same thing. After completing the IQ test, you will receive a score indicating how many you successfully answered correctly. In addition, you will be able to see explanations for why a particular email was either legitimate or phishing. Good luck!